Welcome to the deep dive. Ready to kind of step back in time with us and get inside the head of a Roman emperor?
Always.
Today, we're tackling Marcus Aurelius.
Oh, fascinating choice.
And his Meditations. Which, we should probably say up front.
Yeah.
Meditations was never meant to be, a published work, right?
Yeah, it's more like a personal journal. Almost like we're peeking into his private thoughts.
Right. It wasn't for us.
No.
So we've got excerpts from that and some background from the book's intro. And I think our mission here is to uncover, who was this guy?
Yeah.
Not just the emperor part, but, the philosopher.
The man behind the kind of the myth.
Yeah, the man behind the myth. How did Stoicism shape his life and leadership? And maybe see if there's any wisdom in there for us today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible that we even have this kind of window into a figure like Marcus Aurelius.
Mm-hmm.
It's, like you said, it's personal, it's raw, it's him wrestling with these huge questions.
Right. And I think what's really interesting is he wasn't just, handed the throne, right?
No, not at all. He was adopted into the imperial family, groomed from a young age for leadership. His education was intense. Rhetoric, law, philosophy, the whole works.
From childhood, they're you're going to be emperor.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And even as a teenager, it seems he was already drawn to Stoicism.
Wow. So he's, getting ready to lead, but also, deep in this philosophy. So then he finally becomes emperor. It's 161 AD.
Yep.
What happens? How did those two things come together?
Well, one of the first things he does is appoint Lucius Verus, his adopted brother, as co-emperor.
Whoa, sharing power.
Sharing power, which is pretty remarkable for a Roman emperor, right? I mean, these guys had absolute authority.
Right.
So I think it speaks volumes about his character.
Yeah. So now we've got wars and plagues and even a revolt by one of his top generals.
Oh, yeah. All that fun stuff. And that's where Meditations gets really insightful. You see him processing these insane challenges, reflecting on his duties, just trying to be a good person and leader, and all through this Stoic lens.
Okay, so paint a picture for us. What kind of stuff are we actually reading in Meditations?
Well, there's this one entry where he's making a list of things he's grateful for, his family, his teachers, even a remedy he got in a dream.
Oh, like a gratitude list.
Exactly. And it's so human, right? This emperor, in the midst of all this chaos, taking time to appreciate the good stuff.
That is so relatable.
Isn't it? And then there's that other entry where he's literally talking about struggling to get out of bed in the morning, having to psych himself up to face the day.
Oh, I've been there. Why do I have to adult today?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a reminder that even emperors had those Monday moments.
Yeah.
But it also brings up this big question. What exactly is this Stoicism that he keeps referencing?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people today have this idea that Stoicism is just about, accepting everything passively.
Oh, totally. Just grin and bear it no matter what.
But clearly it's more complex than that, right?
Way more. At its core, Stoicism believes that the universe is governed by this rational force.
Oh.
They called it logos.
Logos.
And they saw this force as a divine plan. Everything happens for a reason.
So are we talking feet here? Because that can feel a little icky. What about free will?
It is a little tricky. So they believed in a sort of cosmic order, yes, but they also stressed our power to choose how we react to things. It's imagine a dog tied to a moving wagon. It can choose to walk along or get dragged. The outcome is the same, but the experience is totally different.
Okay. I think I'm starting to see how this philosophy could be useful, especially for a guy like Marcus Aurelius. I mean, he faced so much that was beyond his control. But how did he actually use these ideas? How do you deal with rebellions and plagues with this dog and wagon thing?
That's where it gets really interesting. Stoicism shifts the focus from trying to control what's outside of us, which we often can't, to mastering our inner world, our thoughts, our reactions. And you see this play out constantly in Meditations.
So, give me a concrete example. How does this show up in his writing?
So there's this passage where he's reflecting on his own death.
Okay.
And he's totally calm about it, not scared at all. He compares it to a ripe fig falling from a tree. It's a natural part of life. No need to resist it.
Whoa.
It's a beautiful image, right?
Yeah, it's kind of look, we're all on this journey and it ends the same way for all of us. Let's focus on making the journey worthwhile. But what about other stuff, dealing with difficult people? I mean, ancient Rome was probably full of them, right?
Oh, I'm sure. And that's where this idea of controlling our reactions comes in. There's another entry where he's essentially giving himself advice on how to handle anger.
Okay.
He's not denying the emotion. He's trying to understand it, reframe his perspective. It's about taking control of your emotional response.
So it's not about like suppressing emotions, it's about managing them, right?
Exactly.
Which makes me think, how many times have I let someone else's bad mood like ruin my whole day? Maybe Marcus Aurelius has some tips.
Maybe he does. And it brings us to another interesting influence on his thinking. Heraclitus, the pre-Socratic philosopher.
Oh, the you can't step in the same river twice guy.
That's the one. He had some pretty radical ideas about change. He believed the universe is in constant flux, always changing.
Oh yeah, he was big on that.
And this really resonated with Marcus Aurelius. He describes time as like a violent current of events.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
Isn't it? And it connects to this Stoic idea of focusing on what you can control, which is mainly your own thoughts and actions in the face of a world that's constantly in motion.
Okay, so we're starting to see how Marcus's background, his training, his philosophy all kind of come together in meditations. But let's be real. Even with all his wisdom, he was still a product of his time, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that raises some tough questions.
Like, slavery was just a normal part of life back then. How do we reconcile that with what we know about Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism?
It's a good question, yeah. And it makes you think about how we approach these historical figures.
Yeah.
We can admire their wisdom and learn from them, but we also have to acknowledge that their views were shaped by their context.
Right, their world was very different from ours.
Totally. So how do we, as modern readers, navigate those potentially contradictory aspects of Marcus Aurelius and his philosophy? I think the best way to approach meditations is not as like a rule book,
Okay.
but as a record of one man's journey to live a good life.
Yeah.
In a really complex and challenging world, he's figuring it out as he goes.
Yeah, he's working through it in real time.
Yeah, just like us.
Just like us. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll dive deeper into the text itself. Stay with us.
It really is like reading someone's diary from centuries ago.
And yet, it's so relatable.
Right, like he's wrestling with the same big questions we are.
Totally. And I think what's really striking is how he weaves those Stoic principles into everything. It's not just theory for him, it's like his operating system.
Absolutely. You see that especially in how he deals with death. He doesn't shy away from it at all. Like there's this one passage he writes, "You have embarked. You have made the voyage. You have come to shore. Go ashore."
Wow. That's powerful, right?
Yeah. It's kind of stark, but also like calming in a way.
I think so too. He's taking the fear out of it by just acknowledging it, accepting it.
And he does that by comparing it to like everyday things, right?
Yeah, like he says, Hippocrates cured many illnesses and then fell ill and died. The Chaldeans predicted the deaths of many others. In due course, their own hour arrived.
So he's saying, look, death is as natural as a doctor getting sick or a fortune teller running out of time.
Exactly. And then he brings it back to those Stoic beliefs. He says, whatever the nature of the whole does, and whatever serves to maintain it, is good for every part of nature. The world is maintained by change in the elements and in the things they compose. So death, like change, is just part of this bigger picture. It's essential.
Right. And that acceptance, I think, is what frees him to focus on living well, on making the most of his time here. There's another line where he says, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one."
That's good. Less talk, more action.
Right.
Don't just theorize about being good. Actually go out and be good.
Exactly. And you see that throughout meditations.
Sure.
He's constantly reminding himself to act in accordance with virtue, to be just, to keep his emotions in check. All that Stoic stuff.
But he's not pretending to be perfect, is he?
No, not at all. He's very open about his struggles.
Yeah, I mean, remember that entry where he's thanking the gods for keeping him from sleeping with his grandfather's girlfriend?
Oh, yeah. That one's a little
out there.
Yeah. But it makes him seem so much more human, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly what you'd expect from a Roman emperor. It's like, okay, this guy's just a dude working on himself like the rest of us.
Totally. And it shows that this self-improvement thing, it's a constant process. Like in book 2, he writes, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil."
It's like he's mentally preparing himself for all the jerks he's going to encounter.
Right.
I love it.
It's like a pep talk.
Yeah. Okay, Marcus, brace yourself. It's going to be a day full of difficult people.
Exactly. But then he goes on, and this is the key part, he says, "But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own."
So even when someone's acting like a jerk, he's seeing their humanity.
Yeah. And it's a reminder to practice compassion, even when it's hard.
Which can be really, really hard.
It can.
Hmm.
And he brings it back to focusing on your own virtue. He writes, none of them can hurt me. No one can implicate me in ugliness, meaning the real harm comes from within,
Yeah.
from your own choices.
It's that Stoic idea of what's in our control versus what isn't. We can't control what other people do, but we can control our reactions.
Exactly. And that's where true freedom is, according to Stoicism. Mastering that inner world makes you less vulnerable to the chaos out there.
It's like building this inner fortress, a place of peace amid the storms.
Perfectly put. And in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius is giving us the blueprint for how to build that fortress.
Like we have the power to decide whether we let those external things affect our inner peace.
Yeah, and that's an ongoing thing, right? It's not a one-time decision. It's like a daily practice.
It makes me think about his intentions with Meditations because we know it wasn't for an audience, but it does feel so carefully crafted at times.
That's a good point. Remember, he was highly educated, trained in rhetoric.
All right, so even his personal thoughts naturally take on a more, structured, almost literary form.
Exactly. You see vivid imagery, literary allusions. There's even like elements of drama in how he explores these philosophical ideas. Like, remember that passage where he compares the human lifespan to leaves, growing in spring, flourishing, then falling? He's quoting Homer's Iliad there.
Oh, wow. So he's weaving classical literature into his private reflections.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's a beautiful image, though, that cycle of life and death.
It is. And it really reinforces that Stoic idea of seeing ourselves as part of this larger natural order. But he also doesn't shy away from the hard questions.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Like in one passage, he actually questions why evil exists if the universe is governed by this benevolent force.
Whoa, that's a big one.
Right. He even wonders if the gods even care about human affairs at all.
It's kind of refreshing to see a figure like Marcus Aurelius express doubt,
Totally.
It makes his search for meaning feel more genuine, more human.
Yeah, he's not giving us all the answers. He's on the journey, too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what keeps Meditations relevant today. It's not this rigid rule book. It's more like an open invitation to join the conversation.
Yeah, to reflect. Ask your own questions.
You figure things out for ourselves.
Right. It's like having this ancient philosopher as a guide on our own journey of self-discovery.
I love that. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Marcus Aurelius, I'm feeling like a mix of awe and inspiration.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's awe-inspiring when you think about the depth of his insights, the beauty of his writing.
Yeah, especially knowing he never intended for anyone to read it.
Exactly. And it's inspiring to see how he used this philosophy to face such huge challenges.
With courage and resilience.
Yeah. It definitely makes you think about how we can apply those Stoic principles in our own lives, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So to kind of bring things full circle, I wanted to share this one line that really stuck with me. From Book 6 of Meditations, Marcus Aurelius writes, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed."
Oh, that's a good one.
What do you think he means by that? How could we apply that in our lives today?
It's so simple, but it's really profound. I think he's getting at the fact that a lot of our suffering comes from our own perceptions, not necessarily from what actually happens.
Right. Like we have more control than we realize.
Exactly. Choosing how we see things, choosing how we react. That could be so powerful.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius. We hope you're feeling inspired to maybe explore Meditations on your own and see what resonates with you.
Yeah, definitely check it out. And until next time, keep seeking wisdom, keep reflecting, and keep choosing virtue, no matter what life throws your way.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.